One of the reasons why I have lost interest in film and I'm ready to wrap up my DVD collection and just sort of uh, let movies become what they are for most people, which is like, somebody says to you, "Oh, hey, you want to go see the new Batman movie?" And you go, "There's a new Batman movie?" And because you don't follow the movie news and you don't know these things, most people don't. We're nerds. That's what we do. We follow these things, and most people don't. And I'm kind of ready to be one of those people because it's not just that there's a repetitiveness to the movies, there's also all this infighting between fans. You've got two factions of fans. You've got one side of things where it's people saying, they're crying about how Mulan is not doesn't acknowledge the plight of the transgender, even though Mulan isn't transgender. Or they're complaining about toxic masculinity coming from action movies. Why are there no female characters in Dunkirk, a movie set in World War II where there wouldn't be any in that particular story? And then you've got the other side, and they're crying about can't make the Little Mermaid black, and why is there a girl in Star Wars now? And it's this clash of these two ideologies that just refuse to see anything from the other person's point of view, and they go to the absolute extreme. And they basically accomplish the same thing, which is just hating on movies, finding offense, being, personally offended by a movie. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. Today we're going to be talking about Rambo, Last Blood. Now this is actually the box set that came out about 10 years ago that has Rambo 1 through 4. It also had a digital copy of Rambo 4, which I just ditched, and I put Last Blood in here. This is too nice a case, this tin to get rid of. Rambo Last Blood is a lot of fun. I really liked it. It's not like other franchises from the 80s like RoboCop, Alien, Terminator, Predator, Die Hard, movies that should just have ended. And actually, this is an end. This is a Last Blood. I know Stallone is talking about, oh, maybe I'll do Rambo 6. He's also talked about a prequel. Prequel I'd be okay with. Prequel, it was set in Vietnam, I think would be a pretty good movie. Rambo Last Blood got the toxic masculinity thing stuck on it. And it also was accused of being racist, which I don't understand. The story picks up 10 years after the events of the fourth movie. Rambo has been living in Arizona on his father's horse ranch. His father's now dead, but he has built this little family with his Mexican housekeeper and her niece, who she's raised because the mom has died and the dad abandoned her. The niece, who sees Rambo as sort of like a father figure, is still obsessed with finding her real father and finding out what happened, and she wants to go to Mexico to find him. And against the wishes of her aunt and Rambo, she goes down there and ends up being kidnapped and forced into sex trafficking, or the sex traffickers kidnap her. Um, and Rambo decides to go down there and do what he does and save her. Um, this was a this is one of those movies. See, I'm a as far as like action movies go, when you've got a really vile villain, right? You want that villain to suffer. That's why I like movies like Taken. See, if a villain just sort of, I always think of it this way. Imagine the villain thinks that he's won. Ha 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 ha. I've triumphed. I beat the good guy. Nobody can stop me. And what they don't know is that the bomb that they planted somewhere else is actually planted under their seat, and then they blow up and die. That's not satisfying because the villain didn't see it coming. The villain has to know they are defeated. And that is what the Rambo movies give us. The Rambo's movies give us a catharsis. They give us this action hero who's going to find the bad guy and really make him pay. Last Blood delivers in that way. It's not the best. First Blood is still the best. I'd really have to watch them all chronologically to really even know where this fits. It doesn't have the goofy fun of 2 and 3. It is much more like Part 4 in the sort of bodies getting shredded kind of way. They turned Rambo into a Western, which I thought was fascinating. I thought that was so interesting. He doesn't have the long hair anymore. He doesn't have the bandana, which makes sense. He's an old man now. He's not going to look the exact same way as he did 40 years ago. This is where the sort of toxic masculinity part baffles me. Is Rambo a toxic male? Yes. He would acknowledge that he's a toxic male. He's suffering from PTSD. He was trained to be a killing machine in Vietnam. You know, he has nightmares. He digs tunnels underneath his house because he's both paranoid and he needs to just go back to a familiar. He can't just sleep in a bed. The guy is damaged. Of course he's toxic. That's the point of the character. As far as the sort of the charges of racism go, you know, oh, they portray Mexicans as villains. Yes, a Mexican cartel. Not all Mexicans, a Mexican cartel. Mexican cartels are vicious. They chop people's heads off. They terrorize people. It's what they do. They are bad guys. Not all Mexicans. They also say, well, they portray Mexico as this sort of cesspool, hellhole, you know, seedy kind of a place. Rambo goes to one town in Mexico. One town. One town does not represent the entire country. And there are towns like that in Mexico. There are towns like that in America. There are towns like that everywhere. There are legitimate criticisms of the movie. Paz Vega plays a journalist who helps Rambo, then disappears from the movie entirely. She gets no closure to her story. The American version of the movie cuts 10 minutes out that has an opening sequence that sounds awesome. That would have been a much better reintroduction to the character. I don't know why they cut it. The movie is barely 90 minutes. They definitely could have kept that 10-minute sequence in there. The rest of the world got it, just we didn't. there are legitimate things to complain about, but one thing that I praise the movie for is it doesn't sort of, in the Taken movie, for example, by the time Liam Neeson gets to his daughter, you get the feeling that not much bad has happened to her. She looks okay. You get the feeling that nobody's touched her. She hasn't had to go through that. She's okay. That is not the case in Rambo Last Blood. The girl that Rambo is going to save goes through a horrific experience. She goes through what would actually be the reality of where she was. They do not, go soft on her. And that's something that a lot of movies wouldn't have the guts to do. Stallone, I think, with the last movie set in Burma and this movie, really wanted to show the horrors of the places that he was talking about and the villains that are real, whether it was the Burmese army in the last one or Mexican cartels in this one. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with showing a reality of a situation. Like I said, I don't know exactly where I would rate Rambo Last Blood in the franchise. If Rambo First Blood, the first movie, is 5 stars, and it is, I guess this would be, I would go maybe like 3.5 for this one. It's not a great movie like First Blood, but it is a satisfying conclusion, and I still maintain, and this is a little spoiler alert, okay? They don't show Rambo die. At the end of the movie, he's got a gunshot wound. He's bleeding out. He goes and he sits in a rocking chair. And you can kind of say, I think he dies. I think he dies there. Now, I left the theater before I have heard there is a post-credit scene that shows him riding off on a horse. Fuck that part. I don't care. I don't care. This needs to be the last movie. He needs to die. He needs to die. That's the conclusion of Rambo's story. That it's the only one that makes sense. A warrior has to meet a warrior's end. That's why I wasn't satisfied with the ending of the fourth movie where he lives happily ever after. I wanted to see a conclusion to the movie, and if you're going to count that part, then that's right, him riding off into the afterlife. Okay, do not do a sixth movie. There should not be Rambo Fresh Blood or something like that. This should be the last movie. 3.5 stars for Rambo Last Blood. Let's leave politics out of some of these things and just let a movie be a movie.